The machine gunner class is one class that brings a lot of small arms firepower to a firefight. And if used correctly, the machine gunner class can change the tide of a battle and make it go into your team's favor, or the other team's favor, depending on how you see yourself. But there's some common errors and issues that this class has to deal with that other classes don't have to deal with. Now, we all envision this as our imaginary scene that we will always strive for. But in trying to do this, it more ends up like this. So yeah, we've had those moments. We've tried to recreate that Saving Private Ryan scene, or try to find a nice sight line and cut 10 of them down in an open field. We've all been there, whoever's played this class. But there's more to the machine gunner class than simply getting kills or that perfect sight line to cut them all down. There's a couple different uses that we're going to talk about, and in this video, we're going to go over how to play machine gunner right. For starters, let's talk about weapons. For simplistic as you think this class would be for its weapon at least, it's actually got some variety, at least between the countries and in some cases in the countries themselves. So for starters, we have the standard issue. For the US, we have the Browning 30 cal and M1911 pistol. For Germany, we have the MG34 and the P38. For the USSR, we have the DB27 and Nagant revolver. And for the UK, we have the Lewis gun and Webley revolver. Now, at level 3, you get a different class called the Veteran class, and it is the following for each country. For the USA, you get the BAR. For the Germans, you get a MG42 with the Luger pistol. For the USSR, you don't get a second class. You're stuck with what you got at the first class. And for the UK, you have a Bren gun. Another extra bit is that every country besides Germany for their machine gunners has at least one class with a hammer, so you can help engineers build and get a couple XP points that way. So let's start off talking about some basics and getting an understanding of how the class should work. So for starters, this class is a very cumbersome and awkward class. Arguably the least maneuverable of any other classes, and the reason behind that is you can't bring your firepower in effectively as any other class can in a given moment. So say maybe you get ambushed, you see an enemy, you can't just fling up your gun and instantly shoot at them. You have to aim for a quick second or grab the gun and then start shooting. You can't just start shooting from the hip. You have to start aiming. And this is where it gets into how you should move as a machine gunner. You need to be more towards the back and not the point man. You should not be up front. You should be more behind your allies, ready to take action if your point man gets wiped out, or if you run into trouble. You shouldn't be the first one up front. Now, with this, it's important that you're usually the one behind cover most of the time. While a lot of your allies are moving up, you should probably be set up behind them. This is where you can put your bipod in action. So, as a machine gunner, as I've already mentioned, it's really hard to aim while on the move or not behind cover. But the bipod attachment allows you to set up behind cover on a wall, sandbags, a fence line, and a lot of different items in-game. Some items are very wonky, and sometimes they'll let you or they'll give you an indicator, but you can set up on a couple different things. Now, with this, the only caveat I'll say is, depending on how you set your gun up will determine what firing angles you truly have. I'd explore around with this just to get some experience in this, as if you're laying down maybe weird in a crater, you're not going to be able to aim down or side to side. You only have a limited array of where you can aim. Now, also keep in mind, you can lay down and set up your machine gun essentially anywhere as long as the terrain isn't messed up by random rocks or trees, anything along those lines. So if you do have no cover available to you, but you do have maybe a little hillside or something you can use to fire at the enemy, you can use that too if you need to improvise. It's what you see in the map and what you see around you. This comes down to what I always say in a lot of my videos, situational awareness. Where you're at, where your allies are at, and what's around you to use. Some places you may not have a wall or something to use, but you might have some nice little hillsides and ditches to use. Use what you have at your disposal. Now, I would recommend, if possible, getting a more high ground position that you can maneuver in. These are kind of few and far between to come by, so using walls as you need to on most maps will be better. Certain maps like Remagen and El Alamein have really nice high point positions, but most of the time you're going to be behind walls or a fence line that you can use to set up your machine gun. So just look around, see what you've got, and make the best judgment call. It all depends on the scenario you find yourself with and who's around you and what you have going on in your vicinity. Now, we've talked about movement, but we need to talk about more about the machine gun itself. Now, let's talk about the mentality first. It should not be about getting constant kills or what I mentioned at the very beginning. There's a couple different things that you should be doing more with a machine gun instead of just aiming blatantly for kills every single second. First would be suppressing fire. The suppression mechanic in this game is very valuable at pinning enemies down and making them very hesitant to stick their heads up and actually attack you if done correctly. And any gun can do this, but the machine gun does it well because it can constantly fire extreme bullets that can keep the enemies down and make it very unappealing to actually attack you. Now, with the suppressing fire, you're also doing another thing. You're letting the team essentially know where the enemy is at. Now, machine guns have tracer rounds, and each side has a color. Usually the Allies has red, while the Germans typically have a green color for their tracers. And you can use these to show where the enemy is at from where someone is firing. Machine guns are the only gun in the game that have tracer rounds, so keep that in mind. Now, overall, it's important that, yes, you are still trying to kill the enemy with this class, but it's also important that you remember that this class is more of a support role for the rest of your squad. You're not a frontline fighter, and you can do more than just kill the enemy. There has to be something that sets this class apart from the other classes, and its suppression ability is one of those abilities. Now, the other ability that sets the machine gunner apart from any other class with their rifles and just guns in general, they can destroy lightly armored vehicles such as trucks and jeeps with enough gunfire. If you put enough rounds into a vehicle, whether it's a supply truck, transport truck, or a jeep, it will destroy the vehicle. Now, with all this, we've talked about aspects like suppressing fire, staying in cover behind your allies, utilizing cover as much as you can, having good situational awareness. But there's going to be times in any game that you're probably going to get ambushed and caught with your pants down. If you need to, you can hit fire the machine gun. How so? You click down your aim button of what you have mapped, and you click the fire button. Now, keep in mind when you do this, this is mostly if you are in very close quarters, because the accuracy, if you can even call it that, is very non-existent. Essentially, your accuracy is by volume, so you're hoping you spit out enough lead fast enough that the enemy just melts away and dies before they have a chance to actually kill you. The suppression aspect does help in this regard, but if you do need to get very uncomfortably close to the enemy, for whatever reason, you do have this ability. So don't forget it in combat and utilize it as you see fit. The machine gunner class may be a bulky and very not maneuverable class as a whole, but it's very simple to figure out once you get out of your head the mentality of, oh, I gotta get that Saving Private Ryan kill set every time or it's a failure. You're not always going for kills as a machine gunner, and it's important you utilize suppressing fire, destroying of trucks, and just little bits of firing at the enemy that you make it kills, you may not. It's moving with your allies and not being caught out in the open. And if you do this, you should have some decent success. But again, the main thing is not going for that kills, kills, kills mentality. You think about the team and keep good situational awareness. I hope you got something from this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.